He stood outside the hospital doors, credentials in hand, white coat neatly folded over his arm, stethoscope around his neck, name badge gleaming with the words, Dr. Miles Elijah Carter, MD, trauma surgeon, and still, he wasn't allowed in. Security had already made up their minds. The moment they saw him approach the emergency entrance of the prestigious North Hill Medical Center in Washington, D.C., they stepped in front of the automatic doors like they were guarding a vault, eyes hard, arms crossed, suspicion carved into their faces like stone. Dr. Carter stayed calm. He'd been here before, not at this hospital but in this moment. The moment when your qualifications disappear beneath your skin. When 10 years of med school, a fellowship, 2 board certifications, and 1,500 successful surgeries mean less than what the security guard thinks you're doing there. He explained himself, clearly, politely, professionally. I'm Dr. Carter. I was called in for emergency consult. The ER is expecting me. One guard glanced at his colleague and said without breaking eye contact, Do you have real ID? The implication stung, but Dr. Carter held firm. He offered his hospital-issued ID. This has my photo, barcode, and hospital access level. The guard scanned it, frowned, and muttered, Never seen you before. Doesn't check out. Another guard chimed in, You say you're a trauma doc? Funny, we already got one on staff. Dr. Carter didn't flinch. They called me. Level 1 trauma. The patient was just airlifted in. I specialize in vascular trauma. They specifically requested me. The guards looked at each other again. One said, Stand back, sir. We're going to have to verify. It wasn't a request. It was a command. That's when the door opened behind them and a nurse peeked out, looking flustered, eyes scanning, desperate. Dr. Carter? Thank God we've been paging you. The patient is crashing. Massive internal bleed. We need you now. The guards turned around, stunned. The nurse shot them a glare. What the hell are you doing? He's the only one who can handle this. The OR's ready. Dr. Carter didn't wait for permission. He stepped past them like the hallway was his, like he was the damn cavalry, and in a way he was. He scrubbed in fast. The patient was already intubated, barely hanging on, BP dropping by the second, 2 surgeons hovering but clearly in over their heads. That's when Dr. Carter stepped in, eyes narrowing behind his mask. I need a vascular clamp now. Retract the mesentery, he's hemorrhaging from the celiac artery. Hands moved faster. Nurses jumped to action. The room went silent but for the beep of monitors and the buzz of suction. He worked like a machine. No, not a machine, a storm. Controlled, focused, furious in precision. Clamps applied. Artery repaired. Bleeding slowed. Then stopped. BP stabilized. The monitors sang a new tune. Lives in the OR don't get saved by hesitation. They get saved by calm minds and decisive hands. And Dr. Carter had both. When it was over, the attending surgeon on staff, a senior white doctor named Dr. Hadley, removed his gloves and looked at Carter like he'd just witnessed a miracle. You just saved the CEO of this hospital, he said. He was in a private car accident on his way to a board meeting. Nobody knew until we saw his name. You got here just in time. Carter didn't say anything. He simply looked toward the OR doors, knowing full well the same people who almost kept him out now owed him everything. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Because outside those doors the story was already unfolding, and not in his favor. One of the security guards had radioed in a suspicious individual attempting to impersonate medical staff. A report had been filed. Hospital risk management was already involved. A PR person was called. And someone high up, wanted to know how this incident was going to be contained. Dr. Carter exited the OR, gloves off, hands washed, eyes tired but fierce. That's when he saw them. 2 administrators, both in suits, flanked by hospital legal. Waiting. He barely had time to catch his breath before they pulled him aside. Dr. Carter, is it? Said the taller one, flipping through a folder without looking at him. We'd like to have a quick word. He nodded silently. There's been confusion about your presence here. Your ID flagged our system. You weren't listed as credentialed for this facility. Carter didn't blink. That's because I was called in by Dr. Amelia Reyes, your ER chief, as an external trauma consultant. She has my privileges approved for emergency surgery. The shorter administrator cut in, that may be true, but our system wasn't updated, and security didn't have you on their authorized personnel list. Carter's voice was low but clear. So instead of calling upstairs, they tried to stop a life-saving surgery? The legal rep, a sharp-faced woman in a charcoal suit, leaned in. We understand emotions are high, but we must follow protocol. He let out a breath. Controlled. Still the professional. Protocol almost killed your CO. Silence. They didn't argue. But they didn't apologize either. And Carter knew, that wasn't the end of it. They were protecting themselves. Already spinning a narrative. One where he was disruptive, where the error was procedural, where the guards acted in good faith. He'd seen it before. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the CEO's family had already arrived. And when Mrs. Adelaide Harrington, the hospital's matriarch and philanthropic powerhouse, learned who had saved her husband's life, she demanded to meet him. Right now. No delays. They brought her to the consultation room. Tall, composed, silver hair in a tight bun, pearls at her neck, power in her presence. You're the surgeon, she said, staring straight into his eyes. Carter stood tall. Yes, ma'am. You saved Charles's life? Yes, ma'am. And they tried to stop you from entering this hospital? He hesitated, but she saw the truth anyway. Her face tightened. Unacceptable. And then she turned to the same administrators who had just finished reprimanding Dr. Carter. Fix this. Now. That's when things started to shift. Fast. The CEO's condition stabilized. The hospital board met within hours. Emails flew. Apologies were made, but carefully, strategically. PR statements were drafted. But Carter wasn't interested in apologies. He wanted accountability. Because this wasn't about him. This was about every qualified black doctor who had to prove himself twice just to be treated as legitimate. Every time he was stopped, questioned, second-guessed. Every time he was mistaken for an orderly or security or a janitor, despite wearing the same coat, holding the same credentials, doing the same job. He stayed quiet for a day. But not out of fear, out of preparation. Because Dr. Carter was about to speak. Publicly. But before he could even post a statement, the hospital moved first. They released a press bulletin, generic, sanitized, full of vague praise and vague regrets. But one detail stood out. They named the CEO but not the surgeon who saved him. Dr. Carter's name was missing. Completely. And that's when the calls began. Reporters. Medical journals. Colleagues. Civil rights groups. Everyone wanted to know, who was the anonymous doctor who saved Charles Harrington's life? And why was his name being hidden? Carter didn't plan to speak. But they gave him no choice. His silence was being rewritten into invisibility. So he agreed to one interview, with a local black-owned news outlet. The story went live at midnight. And by sunrise it had gone viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. And a firestorm the hospital couldn't contain. The headline read, "Security tried to stop him. He saved the CEO. They tried to erase him." Carter's photo was there, stoic, composed, professional. His story told in his own words. And the reaction. Explosive. Support poured in. But so did the scrutiny. Suddenly, the hospital was facing more than just bad optics. They were facing legal questions. Civil rights investigations. Accreditation reviews. And the security guards? Their stories started to fall apart. First they said they didn't recognize him. Then they said his badge didn't scan properly. Then they claimed he was combative. But security footage told a different story. A silent video. Dr. Carter standing calmly, badge in hand. No threats. No aggression. Just rejection. Repeated. Undeniable. And that's when someone, no one knew who, leaked the internal incident report. A report that painted Dr. Carter as potentially threatening. A report filed before they even knew who he was. And now that report was public. And the hospital? Caught red-handed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift black voices and expose hidden truths. The report was out. Public. Viral. The language inside it was clinical, sterile, coded in the way institutions have mastered. Words like non-compliant, unverified individual, escalated behavior. But anyone with eyes could see what it was. A blueprint for character assassination. A fabricated document meant to shift blame from the institution to the man they tried to keep out. But what North Hill Medical Center hadn't anticipated was just how much the public would care. Dr. Miles Carter wasn't just a name anymore. He had become a symbol. Not because he wanted to be, but because the truth had exploded too loudly to be silenced. Local news stations picked up the story. Then national. Morning talk shows. Podcasts. Panels. Civil rights attorneys weighed in. A coalition of black physicians across the country issued a statement demanding an independent investigation into North Hill's practices. But even in the spotlight, Carter remained steady. He didn't lash out. He didn't gloat. He didn't turn the moment into a spectacle. Instead, he showed up, day after day, to the hospitals that did welcome him, saving lives in silence while the storm around his name raged louder. But behind closed doors, North Hill was unraveling. Emails leaked. Internal memos showed frantic attempts to manage optics and limit reputational damage. One leaked message read, "We need to avoid making this about race." But of course it was about race. It had always been about race. And now the country was watching. The CEO, Charles Harrington, remained in critical but stable condition, unable to speak. But his wife Adelaide wasn't staying quiet. She gave a statement outside the hospital, surrounded by reporters. "Dr. Carter saved my husband's life," she said clearly, "and he was treated with suspicion and disrespect. That is not acceptable. Not from this institution. Not in 2025. Not ever." Her words hit like thunder. But the board at North Hill had other priorities. Meetings were held. Lawyers circled. Security contractors were questioned and quietly dismissed. A few mid-level staffers were reassigned. And the hospital tried to do what all institutions try when cornered: find a scapegoat and move on. They offered Dr. Carter a formal written apology, one carefully reviewed by their legal department. He declined to sign any confidentiality agreement. They upped the offer. Money was mentioned. A consulting role. A diversity partnership. Carter walked out of the meeting without responding. Because this wasn't about money. It was about truth. And truth doesn't come with a price tag. Then came the breaking point. A whistleblower, an anonymous nurse, leaked body cam footage from one of the security guards. It wasn't supposed to exist. Hospital security wasn't authorized to wear recording devices inside the ER perimeter. But one had. And the footage was damning. It showed everything. Dr. Carter arriving, explaining himself calmly, presenting credentials, being repeatedly denied. It showed one guard laughing as he muttered, "He doesn't look like a surgeon to me." And worst of all, it showed the moment the nurse ran out screaming, "We need him now," and the guard still hesitated. That footage lit the fuse. Lawsuits were filed. Protests began outside the hospital. Former patients of color began sharing their own stories of discrimination at North Hill, stories that had gone unnoticed for years. And then, just when the hospital thought it couldn't get worse, something happened. Something no one expected. Charles Harrington, the CEO, woke up. 3 weeks after surgery. Weak, groggy, barely able to speak, but aware. And the first thing he asked for was the name of the doctor who saved his life. When he was told, he nodded. Slowly. Then he asked to meet Dr. Carter. Alone. Privately. That meeting happened the next day. In a corner ICU suite behind closed doors. No cameras. No press. Just two men. One lying in a bed, the other standing with arms folded behind him. What they said in that room no one knows. But what followed was unprecedented. Within 48 hours, Charles Harrington issued a public video statement from his hospital bed. His voice was strained but clear enough to break the silence. "I owe my life to Dr. Carter." He was blocked. He was profiled. He was almost turned away. If he had walked off, I wouldn't be here. That's a fact. And it's a disgrace. I take full responsibility for the culture of this hospital. Change starts now. The video broke the internet. It forced the board to act. A full external audit was ordered. The chief of security resigned. The chief operating officer took a leave of absence. And the chief diversity officer, who had ironically said nothing during the entire ordeal, was replaced. But that wasn't all. Harrington requested that Dr. Carter be offered a seat on the hospital's board of trustees. Not as a diversity hire. Not as a PR stunt. But as a voting member with full authority. And Carter? He said he'd think about it. Because the offer came with strings. A non-disclosure clause. A media blackout. And quiet pressure to step away from the public stage. They wanted to honor him, but on their terms. Clean up the mess without admitting how deep it went. Dr. Carter held a press conference outside North Hill. Calm. Resolute. I didn't come here to be on anyone's board. I came here to do my job. I was almost stopped from doing that because of how I look. That is not a North Hill problem. That is an America problem. And we need to confront it, not cover it. The crowd erupted. The clip went viral, again. And now other hospitals were in the spotlight. Other doctors of color were stepping forward. Surgeons, internists, nurses, EMTs, all with stories that sounded too familiar. The story had become something bigger than Carter. It was a movement now. But not everyone was celebrating. Deep inside the administrative wing of North Hill, a sealed file had resurfaced. One buried years ago. Titled Incident 14B. Locked behind multi-layer clearance. It had nothing to do with Carter. At least, not directly. But it mentioned a name he would recognize. And a signature. Dr. Amelia Reyes. The same ER chief who had called him in that day. The same one who had vouched for him. A woman he trusted. A friend. The file suggested she had been part of a committee years ago that quietly buried multiple bias-related complaints inside North Hill's system. Complaints about security. About admissions. About credentialing practices. And now, someone had leaked that file to the press. Just as Carter was beginning to consider leading a national task force on systemic bias in medicine. Headlines changed. Hero surgeon linked to controversial cover-up. It wasn't true, not directly. But the media doesn't wait. The narrative had begun to turn. Online comments shifted tone. Support fractured. And quietly, someone began circulating anonymous tips to journalists. Tips that questioned Carter's credentials, his background, even his intentions. A whisper campaign. Coordinated. Strategic. He wasn't just fighting one hospital now. He was fighting an entire system that wanted him back in his place. The hospital board issued a statement. We are deeply concerned about new information related to past administrative misconduct. We are conducting an internal review and ask the public to reserve judgment. But judgment was already happening. In headlines. In hashtags. In hallways. And Dr. Carter? He sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by unopened letters, emails, interview requests, threats. He'd been offered a book deal. A documentary. Even a TV series. He'd said no to all of it. But now, with his name under fire and Reyes not returning his calls, he began to wonder, had he been used? Was he a hero, or just a convenient face for a hospital trying to clean its image? And then late one night, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. But something in him said yes. The voice on the line was low. Shaky. Dr. Carter? I worked in records at North Hill. I know what they're doing to you. There's something you need to see. I have proof. But I can't talk here. They're watching me. Meet me tomorrow night. Same place they tried to stop you. 10 p.m. Come alone. Then the line went dead. Carter sat in silence. Heart pounding. He looked out the window. Flashing lights in the distance. And for the first time in weeks he felt it, not fear. Not fame. But danger. Real danger. Because if what that voice said was true, then this wasn't just about a hospital's mistake. It was about a cover-up. One that went higher. One that someone didn't want exposed. And if he showed up the next night, he might not walk away. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The air was thick with late summer humidity, streetlights casting long shadows across the North Hill Medical Center parking lot as Dr. Miles Carter pulled his car into the rear emergency staff entrance. The very same place security had denied him entry just weeks before. It was 9:57 p.m. A few nurses crossed the lot, oblivious to him. No security guards in sight. Nothing but the low hum of AC units and the tension building in his chest. He glanced at the clock again. 9:59. 1 minute until the anonymous caller was supposed to show. 1 minute to decide if this was bravery or recklessness. Because deep down he knew what this meeting represented. The difference between surviving this scandal or being swallowed whole by it. He stepped out of his car, phone in hand, camera app open just in case. The entrance was dim. A door marked personnel only. He leaned against the wall, waiting. And then, exactly at 10 o'clock, a shadow detached itself from the edge of the building. A woman. Hoodie pulled low, head down, clutching a thick manila envelope like it was radioactive. She looked over both shoulders, then spoke, barely audible. "You're Carter?" He nodded. "I don't have much time," she whispered. "They've been scrubbing everything. Files. Emails. Badge logs. But I pulled a backup from the legacy archive server. They forgot it was still synced to cloud." She handed him the envelope. He started to open it, but she stopped him. "Not here. It's not just about the guards. Or Reyes. It's about a pattern. A system. There've been dozens of incidents. Patients. Staff. Even other doctors. Most of them didn't have your outcome." His pulse quickened. "Why are you helping me?" She paused. "Because I was one of them. 10 years ago I was a resident. First year. I reported what I saw, racism, discrimination. They blackballed me. I had to quit medicine. Took a desk job just to survive." She took a deep breath. "This is bigger than you think. If you go public with this, it's not just a scandal, it's a collapse. They'll come after you." He stared at the envelope. "Who's they?" She looked around again. "Start with Harrington's predecessor. Then look into the board's private funding channels. Follow the emails with the ghost logins. And be careful who you trust." With that, she turned and vanished into the dark. Carter stood alone, staring at the thick packet in his hands. He opened it slowly once back in his apartment. What he saw turned his stomach. Internal memos dating back 15 years. Complaint after complaint. Redacted names. Dozens of them. Most were stamped resolved or lacking evidence. Others were just gone, marked and no file found. But the most damning piece was an email chain between former board members, discussing discreet removal of staff who didn't align with institutional culture. Code for people who pushed too hard, asked too many questions, or looked the wrong way. One message stood out. Dated March 2015. It referenced a Dr. Reyes and a Carter. But it wasn't about Miles. It was about his father. Dr. Elijah Carter. A name he hadn't heard in years. A surgeon who disappeared from hospital records after mysteriously retiring in his 40s. He never talked about it, just said the system burned him out. But now Carter saw the truth. His father had worked at North Hill, briefly, and had filed a formal complaint about racial bias in surgical staff promotions. That complaint? Buried. Never made public. One reply in the chain read, "Handled. Consider matter closed." Rage rose in Carter like a fire. This wasn't just about him. This was generational. Legacy. They'd done it to his father. And they were trying to do it to him. The difference? He wasn't going to disappear. The next morning, Carter contacted an investigative journalist named Lila Trent, respected, relentless, and one of the few who had offered to tell the story without sensationalizing it. He sent her copies of the files. Everything. "I don't care what it costs," he told her. "Run it all." She hesitated. "Are you ready for what happens next?" "No," he replied. "But I'm doing it anyway." Within 24 hours the exposed dropped. Title: A Hospital's Hidden History, The Systemic Erasure of Black Doctors at North Hill Medical. It wasn't a headline, it was a reckoning. And it named names. Real ones. Board members. Department heads. Even a federal official who once sat on the hospital's advisory committee. It exposed a pattern of discrimination dating back 2 decades. Terminations masked as budget cuts. Residents who were told they weren't a fit. Data manipulation in patient satisfaction reports to justify uneven treatment. And worse, Black patients deprioritized in triage, systematically. Quietly. Deadly. The story shattered the media. Talk shows. National news. Senate hearings were called. The Department of Health and Human Services announced an investigation into North Hill and all affiliate hospitals. Medical boards opened disciplinary reviews. Donors began pulling funding. One even demanded the CEO resign. But Charles Harrington had already done something no one expected. He offered to testify. Publicly. Under oath. His doctor said it was too soon. He didn't care. He wheeled himself into a courtroom and told the truth. This wasn't a one-time failure. It was a culture we all enabled. Myself included. And Dr. Carter? He saved my life when the system tried to deny him a place in the room. Gasps in the chamber. Flashbulbs. Reporters scribbling. Dr. Carter watched from the back row. No press. No spotlight. Just listening. Because this wasn't his victory. It was justice finally beginning to surface. But even as the truth spread, the attacks didn't stop. His inbox flooded with threats. Anonymous numbers called at night. One day someone tried to break into his car. Another, he found a handwritten note under his windshield. Careful what you dig up. Some dirt buries you. He showed it to the police. They shrugged. No prints. No cameras. He tried to push on. Tried to focus on work. But his world was spinning. Fast. And then the bombshell dropped. A second leak. One the media hadn't seen coming. This one wasn't about Carter or the hospital. It was about Reyes. A hacked email inbox. Dozens of messages. And one in particular sent from a burner address. Ensure Carter is on site for the Harrington case. Critical optics opportunity. It was dated before the CEO's accident. Before Carter was even contacted. The implications were massive. Someone may have orchestrated the situation, deliberately positioning Carter for the event that sparked everything. It suggested foreknowledge. Manipulation. A setup. And the sender? The email was traced back to a private communications firm, one known for reputation strategy and crisis control. A firm with past clients including North Hill Medical. The theory exploded online. Was Dr. Carter's heroism manufactured? Was he a pawn in a larger scheme to rehabilitate the hospital's image? Blogs ran wild. The token trap? Doctor or distraction? And Carter's integrity, once unshakable, was suddenly on trial. Again. Reporters swarmed. Colleagues distanced themselves. Reyes finally resurfaced with a cryptic denial. I did not orchestrate anything. I acted on patient need. Any other suggestion is defamatory. But the damage was done. Trust was cracked. And Carter was left staring at a growing question. Had they planned this all along? Was he chosen? Set up? Sacrificed for PR gain? He went back to the files. Dug deeper. Tried to piece together the timeline. One note stuck out, an appointment entry on Dr. Reyes's old calendar. A private meeting 2 weeks before the Harrington incident, with a name he didn't recognize. DL, no full name. No details. Just initials. But something about it felt off. He searched the employee database. Nothing. Searched board members. Nothing. Until finally he checked the contractor list. And there it was. D. Langston. Reputation advisor. Not medical staff. Not even hospital-based. An outsider. But listed as crisis consultant, under a temporary badge. Carter's blood ran cold. He had seen that name before, on the memo about the optics opportunity. He printed it. Highlighted it. And just as he prepared to call Lila with this final piece, his phone buzzed. A text. A known number. It said only, "You're too close. Stop digging. Or you'll end up like your father." Carter froze. The walls closed in. Because the story he thought was over, was only just beginning. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths. The message sat on Dr. Carter's phone like a loaded weapon, its words echoing in the silence of his apartment. You're too close. Stop digging. Or you'll end up like your father. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And it was the first time someone had said the quiet part out loud. He stared at it for minutes, unmoving, pulse steady but rising, a fire burning behind his eyes. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't political. This was personal. And someone out there wanted him silenced, not debated, not discredited, silenced. He dialed the number back. No answer. Just static. A voice mailbox that didn't even name the line. He called Lila Trent next. No answer. Sent her a screenshot. No reply. Something was wrong. Something was shifting. The conspiracy wasn't unraveling, it was reacting. Like a wounded animal. And wounded animals bite. He reviewed every document, every leak, every message he'd received. The name D. Langston kept circling back, always peripheral, never front and center. A ghost in the margins. A crisis consultant with no real history before 2020. No college records. No licenses. Just NDA-protected contracts with powerful institutions during scandalous times. Banks, pharmaceutical giants, defense contractors, and now a hospital. The deeper Carter dug, the more it made sense. He wasn't the focus. He was the foil. The face used to reset a public image. His presence, his blackness, his excellence, weaponized not as justice but as distraction. A planned moment of redemption for a deeply broken system. The problem was he refused to play along. And now they were erasing the board. The first hit came that evening, a heavily edited segment on a national cable news network, raising questions about Dr. Carter's motivations, hinting that his activism was financially motivated. They brought on a so-called expert who claimed Carter coordinated media coverage before the Harrington surgery ever took place. A claim easily debunked, but poison spreads faster than truth. Then came the data breach. Carter's private emails hacked. Select messages leaked, taken out of context, weaponized. One made it seem like he was negotiating a book deal during the investigation. Another showed him venting frustration in a text. "I should have walked away." The smear campaign had officially begun. He called Lila again. Finally she picked up. Her voice was low, shaking. "Miles, we have a problem." "I'm listening." "My editor got a cease and desist. From a federal agency. Not even a lawyer, an agency. They're claiming national security implications in the Langston files." "National security?" "They said if we publish anything else tied to Langston's consulting firm, they'll shut us down. Indefinitely. I've never seen anything like this. Not even during defense leaks." Carter's mind raced. "Are you telling me Langston's not just a PR fixer?" She was quiet. Then she whispered, "I think Langston's part of something bigger. Not just corporate cleanup. Government cleanup. Deep ties. Black budget stuff. Off-books influence ops. I think North Hill was just one piece." Carter's throat tightened. "What are you saying, Lila?" "I'm saying if you keep going, you're not exposing a hospital. You're exposing a machine. And they don't care who gets crushed under the wheels." Silence. Carter closed his eyes, remembering the day his father packed up his office, said he was done fighting, and walked away from surgery forever. He thought his father had just given up. But now he knew the truth. His father had been pushed out. Silenced. Threatened. Maybe worse. And if Carter backed down now, it would mean the system won again. Another voice snuffed out. Another truth buried beneath protocol and PR. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. He met Lila in person that night. A diner outside the city in a booth where nobody knew their names. She slid him a flash drive. "Everything I've found on Langston. But be careful. The deeper I go, the darker it gets. Multiple aliases. Offshore accounts. And get this. Langston once operated under a Homeland Security subcontract. Psychological operations. Civil unrest mitigation. Propaganda engineering. Weaponized narrative," Carter muttered. "Exactly. You weren't chosen to be saved, Miles. You were chosen to be used. They knew Harrington was going to crash. Someone tampered with the vehicle logs. Brake failure. But only on his car. I think Langston orchestrated the crash. Then made sure you were the one standing there when it happened." "Why?" Lila took a long breath. "Because nothing cleans a dirty institution better than a black savior. But it has to look organic. Natural. Human. A redemption arc. And when the shine wears off, you're expendable." He sat in silence. Everything he thought he knew about that day, that surgery, that moment, was shifting under his feet. He hadn't just been part of a cover-up. He'd been part of a script. And the scariest part? It had worked. The public rallied. Donations returned. The board survived. The system wounded but intact. "What now?" he asked. "We go dark," Lila said. "We get evidence. We connect Langston to the crash. To Reyes. To the hospital. And then we drop it all, everything, in front of a federal oversight committee with enough weight to bring them down. And if they stop us before that?" She didn't answer. But she didn't have to. Because she knew. And so did he. The next morning, Carter received an invitation. Official. Unexpected. From the office of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Institutional Accountability. They wanted him to testify. On record. Under oath. About North Hill, about medical bias, about the events surrounding the Harrington case. But he knew, This was the last safe window. After that, the story would be public record. The documents admissible. And Langston? Exposed. He agreed to appear. They scheduled it for 1 week later. 7 days to finalize evidence. 7 days to stay ahead of the machine. 7 days to survive. He worked non-stop, reviewing footage, connecting dots, even tracking down other whistleblowers from hospitals across the country. Doctors who had been silenced, residents whose careers had been quietly destroyed. They formed a coalition. Anonymous at first. But ready to come forward. Ready to testify. Ready to burn the mask off a system that claimed to serve but chose to discard. The night before his testimony, Carter sat alone, staring at a single printed image, a staff photo from North Hill, dated 2009. There near the back, blurry but unmistakable, his father, Dr. Elijah Carter, standing beside another man, sharp suit, narrow smile, D. Langston. The two had known each other. That wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern, a legacy of control. And suddenly, a memory returned. His father shouting on the phone one night long ago when Carter was just a boy. "I'm not signing that. You want to bury me, do it yourself." Then silence. Then the resignation. Then nothing. He finally understood. Langston had been in this for years. Quietly managing black excellence like a PR currency. One success story to clean 100 sins. Carter was the newest addition. But he'd be the last. Or so he thought. Because at 3:12 a.m. the night before the hearing, there was a knock at his apartment door. Soft. Intentional. He checked the peephole. No one there. Then a package slid under the door. No name. No return address. He opened it slowly. Inside, a burner phone. Already powered on. And ringing. He stared at it. 1 ring. 2. 3. He picked it up. No voice. Just the sound of static. Then a single sentence spoken by a deep, controlled male voice. "If you testify tomorrow, your father won't be the only one who disappears." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift black voices and expose hidden truths. The phone in his hand felt heavier than it should have. The words echoed through the line, hollow yet sharp. "If you testify tomorrow, your father won't be the only one who disappears." Then silence. No click. No trace. Just static and fear. But it wasn't the kind of fear that froze Dr. Miles Carter. It was the kind that burned. That clarified. That reminded him of every time he had to prove he belonged in a room he had earned. Every moment his competence was doubted, his presence questioned, his humanity reduced to a headline or an exception. And now they were trying to erase him. Like they erased his father. Like they erased dozens of others whose names never made the news. Not this time. He called Lila Trent immediately. Told her everything. Her voice was calm but tight. "We move forward. No matter what. Bring copies. Keep the originals separate. If anything happens, I leak the whole archive. If something happens to me? To either of us." She paused. "This ends now, Miles. We bring the truth into the light, or we let them keep writing the story." The next morning, Washington, D.C. was unseasonably gray. Rain misted the marble steps of the Senate office building as Carter arrived with a briefcase of documents, his suit clean but his hands trembling with weight. Lila was already inside, sitting beside a growing list of witnesses. Doctors, nurses, administrators, even one former patient's family, there to testify about the silent consequences of bias, the lives not saved. The room buzzed. Cameras lined the back wall. The subcommittee chair, Senator Marisol Devereaux, opened proceedings with the words, "We are here today not to disgrace an institution, but to confront a culture of quiet exclusion. And one man's courage has brought us to this moment." All eyes turned to Carter. He rose, walked slowly to the microphone. A nation waited, and he told them everything. About the day security blocked him. About the surgery that followed. About the board, the leaks, the smear campaign. About D. Langston, the ghost in the system. About his father. His voice never cracked. Not once. He didn't read from notes. He spoke like a man who had carried the truth for too long and was finally laying it down. The room was silent when he finished. But silence speaks volumes. One by one, others took the stand. Confirmed his story. Added their own. Pattern became proof. Denial became admission. And when the final whistleblower, a former IT contractor, submitted hard evidence linking Langston's firm to both the CEO's card tampering and multiple redacted complaint files, the room shifted. The subcommittee moved quickly. They subpoenaed North Hill's full board. A federal investigation into Langston's reputation operations began within 48 hours. And the next morning, headlines across the country read, "Doctor who saved CEO exposes national medical cover-up." But Carter wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because justice doesn't come with a single hearing. It comes with consequences. And consequences came fast. North Hill Medical's board was dismantled. Dr. Reyes resigned, publicly disgraced for her complicity. Several executives were indicted. And Langston? Vanished. His firm's website disappeared. Offices vacated. No arrest. No trial. Just gone. Like smoke through cracks in a system built to forget its sins. But Carter didn't stop there. He declined offers to run for office, to host TV shows, to become the face of the movement. He said no to book deals, brand partnerships, documentaries. Instead, he founded something quieter, something deeper, the Elijah Carter Foundation for Medical Justice. Its mission, to track, expose, and reform institutional bias in healthcare across America. Within months, hundreds of hospitals submitted to independent equity audits. Thousands of Black medical professionals signed on. A national network formed. Lila Trent published a best-selling book, not about Carter but about all the doctors who came forward. A collective memoir of truth-telling. Carter kept working. Kept operating. Still saving lives. Still entering hospitals through the same doors they once tried to block him from. And one day he received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photo. His father smiling in scrubs. Behind him, a younger Langston. And scrawled in handwriting on the back, "They tried to bury me. But I was a seed." Carter smiled. Because the story had never been about him. It was about the fight. The long, quiet war to exist in systems not built for you. To serve people who sometimes wouldn't serve you back. And to heal even when the wound is the system itself. Sometimes the most dangerous rooms are the ones you were never meant to enter, because when you walk through those doors you don't just change the room, you change the rules. Dr. Carter's story is not just about a hospital. It's about a system that bends toward comfort, not justice. But justice only moves when people push. And the truth, no matter how buried, doesn't die, it waits for someone brave enough to dig it out. Be that someone. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that uplift Black voices and expose hidden truths.